Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole for March 16th. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and I'll begin by acknowledging that we're meeting in the territory of the WSÁNEĆ Nation. You have the agenda in front of you, committee. I'd like to suggest that we move item number 9A up to in front of any of the other regular business.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So we'll deal now with the approval of the minutes. You have the minutes from the March 2nd meeting.
So moved.
Second.
So that's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll now move on to item number 9A. This is development permit application number DP 100-785 and development variance permit application DV 100294. This is 9805 Seaport Place to reduce the required side interior setback in order to construct a roof over a restaurant patio area. And we have a presentation by Simon Gillette, General Manager of 10 Acres Bistro Group. Sir, you have the floor. And if you could just push the button so the red light comes on. And, yep.
I don't think you're live yet.
There we go.
Thank you, everyone, for having me here today. My name is Simon. I'm the general manager for 10 Acres Restaurant Group. I've been with the company for about 3 years now. I grew up on a small Gulf island, not far from here. I spent 14 years of my adult life between Tofino and Asus. So small, passionate communities are in my blood. Something I'm quite used to and grew up with and love. So we're very excited as 10 Acres to be joining kind of the downtown, vibrant, growing community of Sydney. With our farm being kind of what feels like a stone's throw over the highway away from the location. We couldn't be more jazzed and energized about this product or about this project. So when we kind of originally looked at the Harrow's restaurant, we thought there was amazing potential for the location. The location was in proximity to our farms, the sea, the abundance of all the local cheese, the wine, the cideries, the wonderful people was just kind of fantastic. And we knew, however, though, that looking at the space and looking at the restaurant and kind of the growth and the curve that it had come and gone with Harrow's, that we couldn't or shouldn't just kind of slap on a new coat of paint and put our name on top and continue on with the same that had been done before and that had already been tried before. So we knew that we had to come with something a little newer, a little bit more exciting and different. And I guess right off the bat, I really do want to convey how maybe seriously we took the existing aesthetic of the hotel. It was something from kind of day one when we were thinking about curating a kind of a design plan as to what it would all look like, and this is kind of where we got to around it. So if you look in the bottom tier, on the very left-hand side there, you can see kind of the rock coloring of what is both the inside and the outside of the building. There's still, of course, lots inside of pillars and walls and whatnot that have that same aesthetic, and it's the exact same that kind of mirrors on the outside of the building. So as you can see with kind of the design board of what we want things to look like, everything from the wainscoting wood to the tile we've chosen to colors and everything, it really does kind of, we've tried to tie in and match that rock aesthetic right from kind of the very beginning. On the inside of the restaurant as well, we went through some kind of big design changes in mind, thinking about kind of investing in the locality of the location. So everything from beer, wine, cider, tap offerings expanding to kind of 16 different varieties, all from Vancouver Island. Building a large raw bar, focusing on fresh seafood, oysters, our albacore tuna, ceviche, that kind of thing. And then right when you walk in the door, kind of a large display wine cellar as well. So something, again, that had not been seen out this way. So we were hoping to, bring something a little bit different and exciting with the space. Now, admittedly, this does come at quite a big cost to seating. For those of you who have been in Harrow's before, you'll recognize that this is quite a different layout than existed before. There was well over 120 seats inside before, now about 60. So it is a significant kind of difference with regards to what we're planning and whatnot. But like I said, it was done purposely with what we thought was kind of a neat features for both the restaurant and like I said, for something new and exciting for Sydney with the raw bar, the wine cellar, big kind of bar vibrantly in the center of the room to kind of bring a little energy. So the kind of our plan for a covered, heated year-round patio becomes the primary aspect of seating for the restaurant. In essence, the inside becomes almost secondary type seating. So this kind of brings us to our major ask for you all. Allowing us to cover the patio space to kind of create a indoor-outdoor garden patio type environment, and allowing us to alter the setback to a zero variance. I know it is common with most city kind of downtown businesses. I should note that we're not actually asking for the patio to be bigger. We're not trying to change the footprint itself of the patio, just the, of course, covering for it that would alter the setback. So we purposely did choose wood instead of kind of a metal or synthetic material to blend in and try to kind of meet a natural look like the stone. So it wasn't a hard fluorescent color or something along those lines, or a dark rigid black or something. It was to blend into what kind of is existing already there. We did note that when we were kind of looking through the plan of what we hoped would be something that people would fall in love with and like, that there was kind of a call in your in the local area plan 5.2.5, noting kind of encouraging architecture and materials that convey a sense of permanence and enduring character, authenticity, and diversity of design. So we were kind of keying on that kind of character and authenticity instead of it being something that looks like it could be torn down tomorrow or something that would not last through a winter. And we have actually had some fair success with building a space like this before. So our 10 Acres Bistro downtown restaurant, of course in an existing building, in an existing space that is quite old. So we had to kind of change and alter things to fit the space. But it's been a huge plus for the restaurant, for our guests. It certainly is kind of a wonderful spot to sit, to be able to feel like you're sitting outside, but also be warmly protected in the wintertime from elements, and in the summertime as well, admittedly, from sun and wind and birds, things like that. This is, pardon my professional photography here, but a somewhat example of what the inside space typically looks like, especially kind of on the right side here, with regards to some of our greenery and the ability to see outside. Of course, the one main difference in Sydney would be that you're not staring at a parking lot or parked cars. You'd be able to kind of be looking at, well, world-class oceanfront views. So big difference there. Again, when I kind of talk about a garden space, garden patio, this is often, this is the type of interior we're talking about. Again, this is the bistro downtown. So lots of different flowers and vegetation and things like that to make it feel like you're kind of an inside-outside type feeling instead of just a stark inside within the green, standing by itself outside. And I included this one because this is, I always thought a good kind of mirroring or showing of what it does look like with rock. You can see along the bottom of the picture there, it's actually a brief clip, but there is the kind of natural wood look with the rock underneath it. The difference being the white beams instead of a natural wood beam that we would be looking after here. So yeah, that would be kind of the overall kind of aesthetic as far as feeling like it's open and unencumbered, but also being able to be underneath and undercover and warm and all those kind of things as well. So that's it for me. Thank you very much for
Okay.
listening.
Are there any questions from
Questions?
the committee? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you could just go back to the slide where you showed the diagram of it inside and outside.
Yes. This one?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So you're talking about 60 seats in the patio area?
So this is just the inside.
Okay.
The patio would be just below.
Okay. And how many seats approximately? I'm guessing that seating around the bar.
About 18 seats, 16 to 18.
So the total overall that you could accommodate would be?
Inside would be about 60.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. In the staff report, it says, no permanent windbreak panels or windows are proposed for the enclosed patio, as the intent is for the space to retain, to be open. But in your letter, you indicate that they're large removable windows to create an open experience.
Yes, so they're yes, exactly that. They're not permanent. They're kind of slide in and out, so we can literally take them out. To be honest, it takes about 5 minutes downtown. It's not kind of, you don't have to pull out any tools or anything like that. It's literally hey, it's a nice day outside, and it's March or even February for that matter. And if it's nice and warm kind of thing, we can take them out on the spot or put them back in again. If it is, generally speaking, about 10 degrees or colder is where that happens. But yeah, so it enables us to kind of have protection, 5 months of the year, and then be totally open 6 to 7 months of the year.
Okay. I mean, a lot of thought has gone into the design, which I appreciate. Seeing the wood against, in itself, and when you show your other slides where we're looking at just, that area in terms of whether it's wood or it's stone and
Right.
so on. But when we're looking at this, we're looking at it in the context of the building that it's attached to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's glass and stone are quite significant in terms of its design. And I'm curious, in several of the slides that you showed us, in other patio areas, you've done two things. One is you've used white,
Mm-hmm.
As a light color, which
Yeah.
I think would show up, wouldn't be as stark,
Yep.
perhaps.
Yep.
And the second thing is that you've had plantings
Mhm.
on those upper portions
Mhm.
of the enclosure, which I think certainly softens it or makes it
Mhm.
look more natural.
Definitely.
Has consideration been given to those aspects?
Yes, certainly. So the intent would be to certainly to create the same type of atmosphere with the plantings inside in our Sydney patio, as well as just like our downtown location. That would certainly be something that we would want to do and carry forward, because we really do believe that makes it feel like it lessens the barrier between inside and outside kind of idea, especially when you only have a pony wall that comes up 2 or 3 feet. So it really does feel like that you're in. So that definitely would be something we would love to do. And as far as the colors go, to be honest, we assumed, I think, that people wanted the natural wood color more than a painted color. So that was the reasoning we went that way. But certainly, if the thought was that something like a white color to lessen the natural wood look, that certainly could be a direction that we go as well.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, wood, particularly, the wood that we use on the West Coast, does complement, stone and glass, and we see it in the design of other buildings, commercial or residence. But in this particular case, to me, it just looks a little stark, just from my experience on the waterfront. Thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
Thank you. Just to hook on to comments from the mayor. Now, I see one of the differences between the proposed restaurant that you're doing here in Sydney as opposed to downtown is, as you noted yourself, downtown you are covering up a street scene and
Yes.
parking area,
Yep.
whereas here you want to enhance what is there, and that is the ocean. So you're not looking to filter the view. You're
That's right.
actually looking to display the view. So I can see that. I have to say I like the wood against the stone. I like the sense of the warmth and the organic sense to put it against the rest of the facade in the building. And that is, you know, there's going to be the long view and the short view, obviously, between it. I think it's an aesthetic thing, and I certainly will understand if majority feels that that's not an appropriate material. I happen to like it, so I think it's a nice feature, and I applaud your proposal and your endeavor to make the changes in this restaurant and to bring something new and exciting to Sydney. I think it's good news. So
Thank
I wish
you.
you the best of luck.
I appreciate that.
Any further questions from committee? If not, there's a recommendation in the staff report.
I'll move the recommendation that development permit application number DP100786 and development variance permit application number DV100294 at 9805 Seaport Place be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for further review and comment.
Okay, that's moved and seconded. Any further discussion? I have one last question. When are you going to be open?
Current world circumstances notwithstanding, our plan was hopefully to be the inside anyways, so long as all of our engineers got stamped off and that kind of thing by April 6th. I'll admit that with the way things are going now, there's been a little bit of a slowdown, but that being said, anything past the end of April would my boss would not be happy with, let's put it that way. So we are trying regardless to be open and offering something by April, so.
Thank you. I think I had Councillor Duncan and then Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I didn't have questions, so I didn't comment on the wood before, because my comment was similar to what the mayor said. When I looked, I thought, I don't know if the wood goes with the exterior of the existing building, even though I personally prefer it as a material. But then when I was out in that area yesterday and I turned and looked and realized the inside of the band shell is very much the same wood material and wood down by the rest of the waterfront. So depending on which aspect of the park, which you're of course looking at being zero lot line and harmonizing with that, it might kind of blend into that scenery as well. So I don't know, maybe it's kind of a transition between the park aspect and that building aspect.
Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just coming to us at this time, just hearing your, you know, your intention of, in normal circumstances when you were planning to open, I mean, given the short time frame to where we are to that date now, but also in light of the world and local circumstances, you're able to open the indoor part of the restaurant and then do the outdoor work at a later period of time?
That's yes, that was our kind of intent, especially wanting to, maybe the untold secret is that sometimes when you open a little smaller, then your final thing is not such a terrible thing to have a bit of a soft opening for a month or so. So if it was kind of, if we opened in mid-April and then the patio was completed in mid-May or something along those lines, that might not be the worst thing for us operationally, as far as making sure that we open on the best foot forward, if you know what I mean. So yeah. The other project on the patio is we would like to heat it underneath, because two things. One, we think that that's a nicer way of being heated versus getting pounded on your head by a lot of heat, especially when, you know, gentlemen and ladies wear shorts or dresses or skirts. It's nice to have warm legs. And two, it's way better on the environment. The gas used for that is incredibly lower. So that's another kind of thing that we're somewhat waiting for the patio.
One last question. Do you have a rough timeline of construction time once you did start, given that you're going to be doing, you know, some significant work like this as well?
Yes, about 6 weeks, we're hoping. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Anything? Go ahead.
Sorry, question through you to staff. since we're talking about what's going on in the world right now, and potentially meetings not taking place anymore, if we're forwarding this to the APC, are they even gonna actually see it?
So indeed, that is something to be considered when that item comes up for discussion. And one of two things, it'll be forwarded to the APC, and depending on council's decision, it could, later, when we get to the special council agenda, it'll actually be held in abeyance until we get committee meetings up and running, or council discusses this and we look at a special circumstance with respect to this item. So it'll be a discussion for the special council meeting.
Councillor Rinto?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think, thank you to Councillor Garnett for raising that, because I now have some concern with the prospect of holding up this process, albeit, you know, the APC is an important stop and would like their feedbacks. My question to staff is there an option here for council to approve without forwarding it to the APC at this time?
If I can, through the chair to Councillor Rintoul, absolutely, that's an option for council to consider if they wanted to forego referring it to the Advisory Planning Commission. Then if they were to recommend, it still has to go through the notification period, etc. But it could go back directly following the notification period directly to council.
Thank you.
That's council's decision.
So to my colleagues on council, and again, given the current climate and enough uncertainty facing businesses from a fairly, I think, fulsome presentation and discussion around this table, we've come up with perhaps some members of council who commented on the wood exterior and the appearance thereof. Personally, I noticed there's a lot of wood inside the restaurant as well. I think it probably flows through nicely, and I liked the appearance that was shown in the presentation. And so I'd be very concerned about the amount of enthusiasm that's here and having it wane and having undue economic hardship against a new business. And at this time, I'm going to move an amendment to my motion to read that development permit application number DP 100786 and development variance permit application number DV 100294 be approved.
Mr. Humboldt?
I just wanted to advise council as well that we do have at least one piece of written correspondence that's come in from actually someone that's, there's two? Okay. Well, one of them is from a member of the Advisory Planning Commission who's also within the 250-foot radius expressing, I think, concerns regarding the design.
That's right.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure council's aware of that. That correspondence would typically go, you wouldn't see it here at the Committee of the Whole, but you'd see it at council.
So to clarify, we have an opportunity to see it before a final decision is made.
Okay. And
That's correct.
just before we get into additional discussion on this, that's not really appropriate as an amendment because it's actually the opposite of the motion. And it would normally be considered a hostile amendment. So I think correct procedure is we deal with this motion, and if it's defeated, then you make.
Is it, by point of order, could it be withdrawn? The motion be withdrawn?
It's not, the motion's not in order to make that amendment, so it doesn't need to be withdrawn. I won't proceed. Oh, you mean if the original motion?
Correct.
is-
Well, there's no seconder now, so
Yep,
the original motion.
yep, that's reasonable.
I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay.
A question through to staff. Two things. If we do consider them a new motion of approval, is the next step actually not to send notice to prior to
Yes.
approval? Okay, so that would be a change in process. And a second question is that if this did go to APC, are there particular design guidelines that would be applicable to this addition or change in structure that APC would be considering?
Through the chair to the mayor, yes, there would be. The staff member, Jasmine Hernandez, municipal planner who prepared the staff report, she did highlight several of them in the staff report. that do apply to the development. There are other ones in the design guidelines for the downtown commercial area. So if it was referred to the Advisory Planning Commission, then staff would do a review of more design guidelines and outline those in the staff report.
Okay, so if, for the good reasons, or a number of good reasons that have been given for possibly considering approval through council rather than APC, would staff at a subsequent report be able to expand on the design guidelines for the benefit of council?
Again, through the chair to the mayor, yes, we would, if that's council's resolution for staff to follow up with a second report.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Can I suggest that perhaps the motion would be to advertise for the variance, and staff could then bring forward the kind of report they would normally do for APC? Councillor O'Keefe?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's a good idea. And I was also wondering if we go straight to notice, whether APC members on their own would still have the ability to review and forward comment like any other member of the public? If we're going out for...
Staff?
Yeah, that's something that we would typically discourage actual committee members from the Advisory Planning Commission commenting directly to council on projects like that. That would typically be referred to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Ms. Verhagen, did you have anything to add? Okay. Councillor Garnet?
Yes.
Okay, so we need a motion, and I've suggested that the motion be to advertise for the variance and ask staff to bring forward a report.
So moved.
Okay. Second. That's moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so going back to our agenda, we'll move on then to item number 6. This is funding for arts and culture, and we have some correspondence from Councillor Fallot. Councillor Fallot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the introduction to this is, as council probably is aware, the town opted out of the CRD Art Service for 2018, and the council of the day never did have a discussion about the voluntary dollars that we had been sending to the CRD Arts. Should we do anything with that? Did we feel that that should still be spent on arts programs? So it just sort of, that conversation just dissolved. And I really feel that we need to sort of pick up that conversation where it was dropped, bring it forward to this new council, because the majority of this council sort of wasn't aware of what was going on previously and may not know the reasons. And I've just prepared a small report, which is in your package, just outlining the history and some of the dollars that were involved, and would first of all like to take a look at what we as a council, what we as a community, how we value the arts. We do a really great job of arts facilities, arts and culture facilities with Mary Winspear, the museum, Artsy, Shaw Ocean Discovery and whatnot. But we haven't really looked at arts programs. We have the facilities, but we don't look at the programs themselves. And that was one of the things with the regional arts funding that basically took care of at least a portion of it. And so now I'd like to ask this council, how do we feel about arts and culture? Are we doing a satisfactory job? Do we believe that we're meeting our community's needs? And sort of set it off from that point on.
Okay, Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to colleague Councillor Fallot for bringing this forward in information that you prepared in advance, and thank you for your work in the past in terms of being the council liaison to the to not only the local arts council on the Sandwich Peninsula, but also the CRD Commission when it was when we were participating in that. I agree with taking what I might call a bit of a philosophical approach to begin. We do know that we have local performing arts organizations. In fact, I'll take a step before that. As Councillor Fallot has mentioned, we know that we currently do provide funding through our community supports directly to the Mary Winspear, directly to the Arts Council, which they use for operational grants, if you will, or for operating purposes, if you will. We do know that the Peninsula Arts Council, Artsy, does take some of the monies that, does take some of their monies, whether it's our grant monies or their general operating monies, and they do provide small grants to a limited number of local performing arts organizations. So some of the money that we do provide through that grant may go, but it doesn't go directly to them. We also know that we've just completed our grants and aid process for this year, and we did award, I think, 3 grants directly to local performing arts organizations for 2020. So that is some direct support from the town. But philosophically, we know we have performing arts groups on the peninsula. We know they have needs. We know that their funding models as nonprofit organizations, whether they're local or throughout the country, look for sponsorships. They look for grants at other government levels. And then they go to their local municipalities. In the CRD, there is a regional arts program that some 10 municipal jurisdictions are currently participating in, which provides funds to performing arts organizations throughout the region. We've withdrawn for that service. And so philosophically, I'd like us to think first about the local performing arts organizations, and do we think the most appropriate way to provide support to them is to continue to do it through grants and aid, just grants and aid? Would it be to consider having a conversation with the local arts council, Artsy, and having a conversation that next year when we provide granting money, or when we provide a grant to them, that we indicate a certain portion of that grant, $10,000, $15,000 of it, go to specific re-granting to local organizations. So council is not making the decision which organizations get it. The experience of the Arts Council would then make a decision on them getting it. We could have a new body created, perhaps representatives from the Mary Winspear Centre that hosts so many performing arts organizations, and the Arts Council and or others that form a review body to review funding for arts organizations, and we could provide funding to that joint body. But again, so that's speaking to philosophically where do we sit in terms of providing support. We currently do, and indirectly we do, but where do we sit philosophically on providing those supports, or should we change direction from what we're doing now? But then philosophically, I think we need to think about the regional arts groups. So whether it's the symphony or the opera or many others that maybe have their home base outside of Sydney, but provide through their performing arts at venues outside of Sydney or in Sydney, are of benefit to residents throughout the region. Hence the CRD Arts Commission service. Hence the majority of municipalities are participating in that. But do we philosophically believe that in addition to supporting our local arts organizations, we should also provide some support to regionally based performing arts organizations? Because part of the argument goes that, well, if a resident of Sydney wants to enjoy the orchestra or the symphony or what have you, they pay through a ticket price. But the reality is a ticket prices alone do not sustain those organizations, and that's why these other arts funding programs are available. So do we think, for the benefit of our residents, that we should provide some supports through the CRD Art Service or otherwise for the success, long-term success of those, or longevity of those regional arts organizations? Thank you.
Councillor Fallon?
So just to pick up from there, one other thing that I would like to bring out of this conversation is in our OCP, we have section 15, culture, and we have a page and a bit that has our objectives and our policies, and it speaks about our facilities and it speaks about promotion. Nowhere in there do we talk about programming. We're talking about supporting other groups and endeavoring that. So out of our conversation, I would like to ensure that as we move forward and go into the OCP review, that we also flesh out our arts and culture policy for the town in the OCP.
Further discussion? Councillor Rintoul and Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I believe the mayor started to, allude to, CRD Arts Service and whether or not we felt within our philosophy, there's a need to look at participating, regionally versus locally. And by my recollection, this council have never given consideration at recent budget time to re-enter the CRD Arts granting program and to be a participant there, and so that seems that it would be a discussion that we probably need to have in addition to this. I think it's a very impressive list of partnerships and of financial support that we provide, certainly to many of our community partners. And Councillor Fallott's correct. A lot of this isn't earmarked, obviously, to programming per se, as opposed to operational overhead and giving them the ability to, frankly, exist, to meet payroll and have the facilities for programming. And so I think the arts, deserve the level of support the town has been providing them. I don't doubt that at all. I don't think that it is the business of the town to get into providing grants ourselves. It may be a slippery slope for sure. There are a number of youth sporting organizations, a number of youth educational organizations that I'm sure would like to line up for that level of grant support for programming as well, and I don't believe that's the business of the town. Councillor Fallott's done a great job here of looking at some local foundations, in particular the Sandwich Pacific Community Foundation that could partner with us. But again, I think I'd like to see a real fulsome review, and perhaps it's a referral to staff when it's able to be prioritized to address it in the context of the CRD Arts program as well, and our continued level of support operationally that we provide now to our community partners. So I'll leave it there, Mr. Chair.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Councillor Fallott for gathering the information together for us. And I look at the list of organizations that we're currently funding, and I think it's quite impressive. In terms of the philosophical view of whether we should support the region or not, I have some personal views on that. My initial reaction is no. However, having said that, I'd like to hear from our local arts community about what we should be doing. And so in terms of, talking about that we need more programming, I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. So there's been no one from the arts community come to council to say, we need more programming, we need more money, we need this. So I guess in terms of what the end game is here, I think it's good to have the discussion. But in terms of, I don't feel like we're in a position to make a decision on anything one way or the other. So I think having a discussion, maybe bringing the community together to hear what they have to say. Another thing is, as Councillor Rintoul mentioned, there's lots of other groups out there as well. So in terms of grants, the arts, do they add value to the community? Absolutely. And I support the arts. But the role of council is balancing a lot of other things. So before saying, yeah, we're gonna give a bunch of money to the arts because that's a good thing to do, you know, we know that there's other things that are gonna be coming at us from the community. You know, there's a new soccer field that is going to be looking for funding from the town. There's a track. So the sports and recreation and younger families, that's something that they're gonna want funding for. So when I look at providing more money to the arts community for programming or for whatever, you know, I'm wanting to look at the whole big picture and find out whether this is something we actually need to do. One last point, I've been started to look at grants and aid programs in different communities around the province, just in light of our recent discussion on that. And a lot of them have lumped in their arts to that program as well. So that's another thing that we could perhaps do. A lot of some of the things that we provided funding to were through our grants and aid program. So another way of going at this at some time in the future is broadening our grants program to have arts and culture and other categories as well, and lump it into that. So we'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Yep. Anyone who hasn't spoken? Councillor Duncan?
Thank you, Chair. So if I'm understanding correctly what the rationale was for pulling out of the CRD Arts Commission in 2018, it was looking at the amount of money that Sydney had put in versus the amount of money that our local organizations had got. No, it was simply, we don't want to spend the $15,000, or we want more control over the $15,000 that was being spent.
If I could, because I'll be a first speaker, and that was actually something I was going to talk about. So one of the key issues at the time that we pulled out was that CRD Arts had come to us saying they were in the process of doing a major update of their strategic plan. They hadn't figured out what they were going to be doing, but they knew they needed a lot more money, and they wanted to increase our contribution, and they couldn't tell us what they were going to do with it. Historically, the grants that CRD Arts had given to organizations based in the town of Sydney has been about $9,000 a year, and historically it was probably somewhere around 80% of what the town was paying the art service. But the year that we pulled out, our contribution was only $15,000 a year, and it's going up to 35. And the art service was not talking about doubling their grants. They were talking about implementing a new strategic plan, and they hadn't figured out what that was. So we were very concerned about committing to that, because with a CRD service, you're basically locked in unless the other participants are willing to let you out. And without any idea what that strategic plan was going to be, some of us were quite nervous. So what we asked them was, can you give us an easy ability to withdraw from the service? Like, you know, in concept, we're okay with supporting the arts function and probably going to be okay with the strategic plan, but give us an option to withdraw. And they had quite a bit of debate about that, and my recollection was they promised us that the other participants in the service would not oppose if we tried to pull out, but they would not write the service establishing bylaw that would simply allow us to withdraw. And when we pushed a little on that, they told us they'd never been able to do that. And then we pointed out a bylaw where they had in fact done that. And they went, oh. And they came back after a lot of debate with, we'll give you a 2-year test drive, but after the 2 years you can't pull out unless you have consent from everybody. And council was not willing to commit to a pig in the poke in that manner. So I think I'm being reasonable. That was the motivation of the majority of us. Councillor Follett, did you want to add
Yeah,
something?
thank you for that, Mr. Chair. That sums it up. Now, North San, so we were giving a voluntary amount. That was, we determined how much we were going to send down to Victoria. And it was the bylaw was changing, that would then be a set formula, and we were mandated into how much we were sending. Currently, North Saanich is still sending what's called a donation to the Arts Services. I forget now right off the top. I think I wrote it down here. Whatever they're sending, $10,000 or $15,000. Because it's a donation, that does not give them a voice at the Arts Services table, so they're not part of any decision making, but that money does go to Arts Services. If we were so inclined, we could certainly do that as well, send X amount of dollars. We would not have a voice at the table. None of our groups in the community would be able to access for grants. But we could turn around and say, this says that we are still committed to regional arts. We believe in it. We just don't want to be mandated into what we send. That's an option that at this point still is open to us. So that's a bit of where the difference is. So going back to what Councillor Rintoul was saying earlier, looking at a different organization to dispense grants, right now there isn't anything available that would suit if we were to decide as a community that we should have an arts advisory group that gets a set amount of money to dispense for arts grants money. We'd have to come up with something, and then who organizes that, who overlooks that, who oversees that, the whole bit. There's another committee that would have to be struck, whether it's a direct committee from the town or whether it's community-based, either which way, there's another layer in there. So what I wanted out of all of this is to start this conversation. Yes, we do need more information, and the CRD is more than happy. Jeremy Loveday, Councillor Jeremy Loveday from Victoria, who is the arts chair, is more than happy to come out here and have a conversation, answer whatever questions we have about the CRD Art Services. I didn't anticipate that we would come up with some sort of decision this evening, but I think we need to start the conversation, start thinking about it, and we actually need to hear back from our community.
Okay, so I've got the mayor, and then I've got Councillor O'Keefe, and then Councillor Duncan.
I would like to do two motions, and since the discussion, one is on local arts groups, and entails the funding we're currently providing directly in our Arts Council of the Artsy Council of the Sandwich Peninsula. But the second one is with regards to the CRD Arts Service. So my motion is to invite the CRD Arts Service to present to committee at a future meeting on the current strategic plan and programs that they have in place.
Second.
I don't think we need a lot of discussion for that. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. I'm not in favor of the motion, and the reason is it's still unclear to me why we're having the discussion at all if our community isn't asking for this. So honestly, I'm not interested at this time to hear what the CRD has to say, to be frank. I'm more interested in what our local community has to say. So if our community gets together and comes to us and says, you know what, as a result of council's previous decision to opt out of the CRD, we are suffering in some way, then I'm open to hearing whatever the CRD has to say. But I feel like we're putting the cart before the horse to go and listen to the CRD before we listen to our own community. And I think that has to take place first. And to me, there's no point in having the discussion unless this is something our community wants us to do.
Councillor Duncan, and then the mayor.
Thank you. Well, we have already heard from at least two of our organizations through the Grants and Aid process. On their forms, they said, we are asking for this money because we used to receive X amount through the CRD Art Service. We no longer receive that because you pulled out. So they're listed here, the Sydney Literary Society and the Sydney Concert Society. $2,500 used to go to the Sydney Literary Society, roughly. They had varying amounts over the years, say $1,500 to $2,500. And the Sydney Concert Society, up to $4,000 a year they were able to get from this organization. So we know at least those two organizations are going to come. Artsy, I'm fairly certain, I seem to remember from your last discussions, they were getting grants from them as well. And I don't foresee any eventuality where we put out a call to arts organizations and say, do you believe you need more funding for programs? And they go, nah, we're good. We got lots of money. Arts organizations are always super flush. They're always going to say the request is always going to be for more money. And if you said, if you got lots of programs right now, if we gave you more money, would you do more programming? They're always going to say, yeah, we're pretty much going to do more programming. And if you ask, the cello concertists, would you like to be able to make a living making cello music? They're going to say, yes, I would love to do that. The question would really be more, does the community get enough value out of these people doing what they are passionate about and being paid from public funds to do so? Do we get enough community members actually taking part in this, or are we funding people to enjoy it? And then it's something like a sports club. I don't go and watch the pickleball people play, but they get a lot of value out of that. The concert groups might get a lot of value out of the fact that they are able to play music, even if attendance is starting to go down or it's not as valued of the public. So it becomes philosophical about what part you think, we're trying to fund, the value to the performers themselves or the value to the broader community of enjoying the arts. But I don't know. I just see that consultation is always going to get, we need more. And from what we've already heard from organizations, yes, they used to get grants from them.
Okay, Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to again draw a distinction between the local performing arts organizations that we are giving money to directly and regional arts organizations that are receiving funding from the CRD Arts Service. In terms of need, similar to our grants and aid process, where we received $45,000 in requests for funding and we were able to give $15,000, the CRD Arts Service gets a much higher amount requested than they are able to give. So there is the perception of need there, and I think if it was out there that we were considering it, regional arts groups would be happy to come forward and explain the needs that they have to maintain their existing program. Again, this is not additional funding for additional programming. This is for the sustainability of the existing arts organizations and their existing programming. So I would like to, I believe that the residents of Sydney would support, and I support Sydney tax dollars supporting regional arts because our benefits, our citizens benefit and the region benefits. And I would like to have a separate conversation about local arts groups. I don't think you have to do one or the other. I think you can agree to do both, and hence my motion to have a presentation, and we can certainly ask, lots of questions of the CRD Arts Service.
Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remember being in the audience when this was discussed by the previous council, and at the time I completely understood, and their rationale made a lot of sense because there was a lot of vagueness to what was being talked about. So I feel like I could support the motion of having somebody come and now explain what it is they want that money's going to go to. That, as you were saying before, it was kind of, well, what is it for? What is it not for? So I can support the motion by the mayor, just having the opportunity to ask and inquire of, what our resources would be going to. So I'm all good with that.
Okay. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. So what I'd like to clarify from my perspective is when I talk about hearing from the community, what I'm talking about is the fact that do they think that they would rather us send money to the CRD to be administered there, or would they rather keep it here? So when we're talking about that philosophical approach to whether we're going to send money to the CRD to be administered that our groups can then apply for. So that's when I'm talking about getting input from the community first to get their input on whether they think that's good for them. And I guess philosophically, yes, one can say that it's a good thing to support the Royal Theatre or things downtown. I guess my view on that is that we've got an excellent arts and cultural center here at the Mary Winspear that we support. I'd like to continue to support that. The rest, downtown Victoria, they receive a significant benefit. Yes, when our people go from here downtown to the Royal Theatre or McPherson or participate in events there, yes, they get benefit, but the individuals get benefit. However, the Victoria does as well because of the people are going down there to go for dinner, spend money down there. So that's sort of my philosophical view on that.
I haven't weighed in on this one, so if I could. So what we're debating is about whether CRD Arts will come and make a presentation, not whether we're actually going to give them any money. We know they're going to ask for money in the presentation, but the big issue 2 years ago was they were developing a strategic plan and they wanted us to commit to funding it without knowing what it was. 2 years later, they ought to be able to tell us what the strategic plan is. And I would think that it would be a benefit to our residents and probably to the arts organizations to find out what the strategic plan is. And if they don't have a good answer of what the strategic plan is, that makes the decision pretty easy in my mind. And I'm comfortable hearing a presentation. And in my view, that doesn't say anything about whether we're going to rejoin or not. It just says we're going to find out what their strategic plan is. Councillor Fallon?
Nope, you've covered it. Yep.
I think we've had a pretty good discussion. Should I call the question? Okay, all in favor of inviting CRD Arts Service to make a presentation? Opposed? One opposed. That's carried. Mayor McNeil-Smith, you had a second motion?
So I'll make a second motion, and of course discussion may lead to it being amended or otherwise. But that is, again, philosophically, through grants and aid, we are allocating each year funds directly to performing arts organizations. We are not providing the level of funding that they are asking for. And we're having to make decisions, not only amongst arts organizations, but arts organizations and other organizations. An organization like Artsy Peninsula Arts Community does make granting decisions. They are tied into the arts community, and I think are the better decision makers on performing arts grant applications. Currently, we are giving something in the order of $20,000 as a general grant to that body, the Artsy. My motion is to enter into discussions with Artsy prior to next year's budget deliberations to consider Artsy separating a certain portion of town funds for granting directly to arts organizations. As Councillor Duncan has stated, there have been arts organizations that came to us and in their applications stated that they got money from CRD Arts and didn't get them. And so if we are directing some of our grants and aid money to, in addition to what we're providing to arts, and we ask them to take some of the money they're currently getting, perhaps that will provide a more satisfactory level to them. So my motion is to enter into discussions with Artsy prior to budget deliberations for consideration of how we allocate arts funding next year to local groups.
Second.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Councillor Rintoul?
If I may, perhaps Councillor Fallon knows the answer, or through to staff, do Artsy not already, perhaps not in the current fiscal year, but in previous fiscal years, have they not done some granting themselves? And have we in prior years indicated that town funds could not be utilized for the purpose of those grants to staff? So they're already using town funds to provide grants?
Correct.
Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Yeah, just on that, I mean, one of the things I would be interested in the discussions with Artsy is, what do they get in a year in grant requests? And what are they able to give, you know, in their current environment? I think it's gonna be the same situation where they're getting much more in requests than they're able to give. I'm not suggesting we wanna close that gap. I'm just looking at it philosophically, whether we give directly or give through that organization.
Councillor O'Keefe, then Councillor Duncan.
I'm not in favor of it, again, because I think we haven't done our homework enough. I mean, this is a good start, but it doesn't include, there's a lot of other organizations out there. I think before we look at handing a block of money to Artsy, we don't know what that amount is going to be. We don't have an idea of what the need is. We haven't done any consultation with the rest of the community. I think it's premature before we do some homework, before we move forward with Artsy. I'm also concerned about, you know, what we've heard from Artsy is the struggle they have already to keep up with what they're doing. They had to get additional money from us to hire administration to do work that they weren't able to do. They have issues with, you know, manpower and getting things done as it is. I worry about having another level of bureaucracy and our money being used up by administrative costs rather than just going to community groups to support arts. So that's one concern. And I think that we still, I'm not sure why we wouldn't just, as I said before, incorporate this into as part of our granting program, which we had talked about reviewing that anyways, in terms of we need to come up with some better criteria on grants and aid, and we're doing some research on that. So I guess my preference would be is that we do our homework first, we look at our grants and aid program, and perhaps it can come under that umbrella. I'm worried that if we go forward into discussions with Artsy right away without doing our homework first, that there's going to be an expectation from Artsy that this is going to happen. And then later if we decide, no, thanks for your time, we're not going to do that. I don't know that it's fair to them to kind of lead them down the garden path, so to speak, and then after we gather information, decide, thanks for the discussion, but we're not going to do that now.
Councillor Duncan, and then Councillor Fallon.
Thanks. In principle, I'm in favor of this motion. Do you envision us hearing from the CRD first, and whether this would be regardless of our decision of the CRD, we'd want to go forward with Artsy, or if it turns out we think it would be better to go with the CRD and kind of offload some of that grant administration, we would not necessarily have to go to Artsy and would continue to support them operationally. Do you see this as either way, it doesn't really impact our decision about Artsy?
Yes.
So then, yeah, I do remember that from when Artsy came before, that so much of the money that we were giving them is going operationally. And I would continue to prefer to support them as that organization, and it would seem to me that we would have to talk about additional funds if we were going to talk about granting, and perhaps it would come from carving out grant and aid and having them administer that rather than council. And I like the idea of having a different body do that than council, simply because it is council time. The larger we make our grant and aid process to go through that, and of course town staff time to go through that process, and being able to hand that over to people who are actually in touch with the arts community, understand the arts community needs, and administer that, and be able to just give them a reliable pocket of money that's dedicated just to arts groups rather than the different groups, you know, all vying for that one $15,000 grant pot. I do like that. So what I guess I would say to address Councillor O'Keefe's concerns then would be that we ensure that before we enter that negotiation, we clarify what information collection process we want to have so that we can simply do that before we go in, rather than us assuming that we will go in there empty-handed. If this motion passes, we know that there's information that we would need to have to go in there. So is there some way we can clarify what that would be at this point in time?
Okay, Councillor Fallot?
Thank you. So, in the past, one of the problems for a lot of the small groups applying to the CRD for grants is it's a very difficult process because their main focus is on servicing professional arts groups. So when you've got, let's say, the Folk and Fiddle or one of the other smaller groups, for them to actually fill out the grant application is an onerous task. So some of the groups have never applied because they just don't have the wherewithal to do that. And there had been some discussion at the CRD Arts to pool a certain amount of money for community arts groups, such as Artsy, for them then to, in a less cumbersome manner, be able to grant out. And then that was decided that was not effective because what they could actually do is a community group such as Artsy or any of the other community groups in Greater Victoria or the region could apply to the CRD grants and receive money as Artsy, who could then use it to disperse to the grants. So that's a very favorable thing. So that's part of the problem with some of the groups. The other part, and it's certainly a conversation that I've had recently with some of the small groups, is volunteerism is, they're both the performers and the organizers, all of that are all volunteers. But so they're running out of volunteers. They're just not getting the body count to help the organization stay afloat, whether the organization is 2 people or 43 people. The other part is fashions change, moods change, interests change, and sometimes what they're presenting is no longer meeting an audience. That audience that they're geared towards isn't there anymore, and they haven't adapted what they're creating. So one of the things, as I was prepping for this and doing my research and whatnot, what I'd like to do is actually have a roundtable discussion with Artsy, with Mary Winspear, and some of the smaller arts groups. Just sit down, have a conversation. Are you successful? And if so, do you understand why? If you're not, do you understand why? And to get an idea of who's out there. This isn't about, obviously they're going to ask for money and we're going to say, oh, we have to come up with X dollars now because they're all asking for money. That's not what the prime focus is. The prime focus is to understand who's out there creating arts and culture programming in our municipality, and does our municipality feel it's well serviced by what's coming out of that? It's an informal conversation. Right now, given the current events, it probably won't take place. So this information may not be able to filter through to council in time for us to think and process, but whichever way that goes, I think it still is, it's going to be a good meeting. It's going to be a good opportunity to hear back what their needs are and what their wants are. But I think the more we know, the fact that we're having this conversation, number one, is so important. And we do need to hear back from our community. We need to hear back from our taxpayers, our residents, and we need to hear back from the arts community. And this is what we need. I know that Diane Thorpe, who's the chair of the Artsy, and some of the members, they would have liked to have come tonight. They thought that they could interact with us. And I said, no, this is not the time, but listen to the proceedings tonight and then give us your perspective. We do need to hear back from our community. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go with Councillor Rentoul first and then Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Councillor Fallot, for your points. Yeah, I think staff have confirmed what I recollect from prior years. Artsy already do this. They had been granting money. I don't know what the current fiscal year they had been. And to the point that Councillor O'Keefe's made around, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Perhaps let's talk to our community first. I think this is part of doing our homework. talking to Artsy about, number one, how they grant, looking at sort of the governance structure that goes around that process. Is council doing some of its due diligence? Because if it's not happening now, it has been happening, and we're entertaining the prospect of Artsy doing this again in future. So I'm comfortable with the motion as a means to have that dialogue with Artsy and that linkage to the art community here locally. Thank you.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. So I'm much more comfortable with what Councillor Fallot is proposing, a more broad-based discussion with other community groups. So for me, going directly to Artsy is you're going straight to narrowing the focus to one particular group. And you're not having what I think is needed, a more broader engagement in the community with other arts groups. You know, other art groups that are out there, the Sydney Concert Band, the Peninsula Women Singers, the Ladies Choir, the Peninsula Singers. There's lots of other arts groups out there that maybe they aren't necessarily represented by Artsy. We don't hear from them because they're off being very successful doing their thing. And we're only maybe hearing from a handful that are struggling for what other reason. And so I think to get the bigger picture of the extent of the issue with art groups, we need to have that broader discussion first, as Councillor Fallot says, before we zero in and make a decision to go to Artsy and say, we want you to handle this for us.
Okay, Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Yeah, just a brief comment in that we're not, by passing this motion, we're not saying to our Artsy, we want you to do this. We're not leading them down a path of suggesting they are going to get more funding. What we're wanting to do is to do some of its homework by having a conversation, understanding their granting process, understanding their linkages to organizations that are asking for money. And through the Artsy, we can, and Councillor Fallot, we can engage, the broader organizations as well.
Okay, what I'm hearing is that there are various actions being proposed that all kind of blend together into an action plan that gets us to making a decision about how we want to support arts regionally and locally. And it doesn't sound like it has to be this step before that step. It sounds like things can be done in parallel. I am hearing the suggestion that, or the observation, that Artsy is currently granting some of the money we give them to local organizations. And there's some questions being asked about what is their process, what are their criteria, how well is that working, what kind of overhead is involved. That is simply us doing some due diligence about should we even continue letting them take our funding and grant it to other people, because we've got a process where people could apply to us directly for grants. But putting that aside, which is the motion that we're currently dealing with, there's also been a suggestion that we should have a broader conversation, round table, whatever. That should actually be a separate motion, and the two don't preclude each other. I guess I think we should try to deal with the motion on the floor, and if there's a subsequent motion, that's fine too. So the motion that's on the floor is to initiate this conversation with Artsy. I am looking for just one bit of clarification as who's going to have that conversation. Are we expecting staff to do that? Are we going to have an ad hoc committee do that?
Thank you for that question. I would suggest Councillor Fallot, who is currently our liaison to Artsy, and myself.
Okay. So I don't think we need to necessarily make that part of the motion, but that clarity was helpful. Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, does someone want to do a subsequent vote? Councillor Fallon?
So I'm not going to make a subsequent motion because my idea of the roundtable is really an informal conversation. I would like to gather some information together. I've already had someone who's willing to, I'm not looking to engage staff. I'm not looking to look at a budget for this roundtable. We've had an offer for a room to meet, and that was, of course, before all of the current events, so that might change. And to see what comes out of that, when I bring that information forward to council out of that informal roundtable conversation, then we can decide whether or not we want to do what we want to do with that information.
Okay.
So essentially what I'm asking for is just basically council support that they're okay with that idea. That if they have any ideas or objections, by all means raise them, but I'm not looking for a motion, and that goes forward from there.
Okay. Councillor O'Keefe?
If you're okay, I'd like to do one anyways, just so that I'll feel better with us moving forward, knowing that it's something that council has supported. So I would move that council support Councillor Fallot proceeding to consult with other arts groups in the community and bring such information back to council.
Okay. Do I have a seconder? Okay. Any discussion?
Just, is there a timeline?
No, I'm just trying to leave it informal, but just to know that you have the support. It's just to proceed exactly as you said, but I'm just doing this so that you know that, yes, you have the formal sort of support of council to move forward, and that we'll see. I feel more comfortable with that, knowing that will come back to council as well as the consultation with Artsy. So then I feel, for myself, a bit more comfortable that we're doing that broader consultation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? I'll just make a comment that any councillor who wants to do some research on a topic that they're interested in and then eventually bring that to council, I would support. I really don't see the need for the motion, but I'm not going to vote against it. Seeing nothing further, all in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. Anything further on this topic? And seeing none, I look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
So that's moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And